All right, Dad. How long did you work on a police department for?
28 years.
And what was your position?
I started as a patrolman and I worked as a detective for 9 years and as a sergeant and a lieutenant and eventually a captain.
Okay. And what's your position on the whole thing that's happening right now?
About the officer that had his knee on the suspect neck. I've only seen the videotape that starts with the suspect already on the ground. So I don't know what happened before that, but what I saw was the officer had his knee on the suspect's neck, and there is a technique to hold a suspect to the ground. Usually what I was taught is not with the knee on the neck, but to step over the neck so that your knee is on one side and your foot is on the other, and your leg is in between. So he's trapped, he can't get up, he can't stand up or run off or fight, but you're not really, you're touching, but you're not putting any pressure. So it seemed like if that was a technique he was trying to apply, he didn't apply it properly. And the other officer that I saw on the video, he actually turned his back to what was going on because he was dealing with some individuals on the sidewalk that were angry, and so he was trying to protect the arrest to make sure they weren't going to interfere with the arrest or whatever. So I don't know how he is even involved because his attention was turned to the crowd that was gathering and not to what was going on there. So I don't know what happened before. I know a little bit about what happened during, but during, he does have his knee on the man's neck, but he's taking deep breaths and talking, and deep breaths and talking, and he's saying he can't breathe, but he's taking great deep breaths and then talking. So so he seems like he didn't have an obstructed airway.
And do you think delirium could have been a factor in that?
Yeah, the coroner needs to look at that and make a determination on that. For just the average person, I think if you just where you're sitting without having any physical exertion beforehand, if you just inhale, exhale real fast, you'll get dizzy. It will affect your oxygen flow. So I think maybe that some of that happened, but it'll be, as I understand it, he's not pronounced dead until he's at the hospital. So I don't know, they'll look at, see if those little very fragile bones in his neck are broken that are associated with strangulation and all that.
And that's why it's pending investigation, correct?
Yeah. So they have to look at the whole thing and to determine, exactly what happened. But
So, do you believe that there are bad cops sometimes?
yeah.
Okay. And what about the cops who don't come forward to denounce the bad cops?
Oh, well, that is a matter of, usually every police department they have a whole, like a really thick book of all these procedures, and you have to stay within those guidelines. They're not, you can break the rules in that book and it not really be breaking the laws. For instance, if you're a police officer and you're making a comment on a open and pending investigation, you're in violation of the rules, the regulation, okay? And so then you can be disciplined or fired because you're making a comment on something you have no business making a comment on. So you have to remain neutral. You can't make a comment for or against either way.
So they're not allowed to, by the law enforcement standards that they were given, to comment or come forward
Yeah.
about these things during the investigation.
Yeah, they can catch them both ways. They can, for the other officers that are not making comments, if they make a comment, they can be in violation of the regulations, which you have no Miranda, no nothing. You have no rights. It's an administrative investigation. They can fire you or they can suspend you. And then there's usually state laws that prohibit a police officer from interfering with an investigation. So if you make comments that interfere with an ongoing investigation, then it's actually a criminal offense. So you just can't talk about stuff like that.
Because it could be biased to a jury, correct?
Well, yeah, if the officers are found that there's probable cause to arrest them for a charge, and eventually it's going to a jury trial, you want to be able to pick jurors that haven't heard 25 police officers saying, oh, it was perfectly okay, or oh no, it was perfectly wrong. You know, you have to be able to pick jurors that haven't made up their mind, and that's real hard to do if officers are making comments about what they think.
So how do you know if these officers are bringing complaints to the table before said investigation?
Say it again now.
So how do you know if the like quote unquote good cops are bringing these complaints about bad cops to the investigation?
Oh, that does happen. What will happen is there's a way to do that. They will make the complaints through Internal Affairs, who will open an investigation. Now, Internal Affairs doesn't answer to anybody. No captains, no lieutenants, no sergeants, no patrolmen, nobody. They answer straight to the chief of police and only to him, and after that to the mayor. So if they make a complaint like that, then the Internal Affairs, investigates the complaint to see if there's either a violation of policy or a violation of law. And if there's a violation of law, Internal Affairs will then turn it over to detectives who will investigate it and make an arrest.
What about the officer that got paid leave? Should he have been fired?
Now, which one is that now? That's
the one that stood on his neck, I think.
I think guys on that where he had his knee on his neck, I think they not only fired the officer that put his knee on his neck, I think they fired everybody, is what I understood. Which I don't get that. I don't understand.
What do you have to say about the officers that get paid leave instead of being fired?
Oh, they have due process. That they have to. They're still an American citizen, just like if we were arresting a rapist. I don't like the rapist, but he has rights. Okay, he has due process, and he has to go to have trial and everything else that he's due. So the officers also have the same due process.
How many agencies or affair offices investigate a questioned police officer?
How many agents? If it's a deal where there's a question about, say, a suspect dies in custody, from where I'm from, then the department would investigate it. Here in Colorado, they'll even go have a different department investigate the shooting. Okay, so if there's a city officer shoots a suspect, the sheriff from that county comes in with a different investigative team and does an independent investigation of their own. But from where I'm at, you'll have that one where you have local law enforcement will investigate it. Then you'll have Internal Affairs investigate it, because it may not be a violation of law, but it might be a violation of policy. Then you'll have the FBI investigate it, because the police officer represents government, and the Constitution says that that the government cannot deprive a citizen of life, liberty, or pursuit of happiness. So in the case of a death, then the allegation is that the officer took away his right to life. So there'll be at least 3 or 4 different agencies investigate it, and then sometime also, like in some of the recent ones, they have the State Department, like the deal in Ferguson. So they're investigated like 4 times, like the Ferguson deals, and the State Department independently, all these are independent investigations, and they all came up with the same conclusions. They took it to an all-black grand jury, and they found no reason to indict the officer. So they're investigated 4 times plus the grand jury investigation.
What is the code of conduct for an officer?
That has to do, again, not only with the law, like all citizens are governed by, but then they'll also have all these other policies. So there'll be a policy, oh, you're not allowed to say bad words. So if you're fighting, 2 men are fighting one another, 2 citizens, it's common for one to call another a bad name. Or if he gets punched in the mouth, he may say a bad word about, having been punched in the mouth. But the police officer is not allowed, for instance, to use curse words, while he's working. Or even if he's off duty and his neighbor's dog is barking and he says, shut that such and such dog up, then the citizen that lives next door can make a complaint and he's in violation of policy, even when he's off duty. So there's all these rules and regulations that also govern his conduct.
What happens if you violate said code of conduct?
Then you can be disciplined. You can be written up, or you can get days off. Now, if you get suspended, what that means is, say in my class there was like 30 officers, so we all have like an hour difference between the time that we're hired. So if I get 1 day suspension, then on the seniority, because I was fairly at the top of my class, then I would drop 30 positions in the promotion process, which means that when we're going to make sergeant, I have to wait for all 30 of these other guys, or 29 of these other guys and women, to make sergeant before I'll have the opportunity to make sergeant. So you lose years and years and years of, you lose thousands and thousands of dollars sometimes on a 1 day suspension, and plus then you lose the pay for that day as well.
What tests do police officers have to make sure they aren't bad people that will never, like people that won't murder or people that aren't racist?
Well, first they do a background check on you, and so they're going to talk to everybody they can that knows you. Your high school teachers, to see if there's any tendency that these other people observe that you're a violent person. And then they're going to put you through psychological examinations. And then they're going to put you through the police academy, where they're going to put you through all these role-playing scenarios to see if they can, solicit some kind of improper, violent response when they put you under stress. And then they're going to put you, also in the hiring process, they put you through an oral review board, where they pretty much do the same thing. They put you through a lot of stress in an oral review board. And when you get through all of that, then they're going to put you with a training officer for 6 months to a year, depending on where you are. And you're still not a certified police officer, even though you've been through the academy, you've gone through all this testing, all this background check. They're still going to evaluate you every day, that training officer. And then they're going to switch training officers on you, so you'll have more than one training officer. So you got several men evaluating you, watching you, how you react to stuff. And then when you're finally done with that, then you'll become certified, but then you'll still go yearly in-service training after that, to update your skills and all that. So,
are law enforcement agencies racist towards hiring?
I guess you could say that. When I first started applying at one police department I went to, they said they would not hire me because I'm white, and they were under a federal consent decree that they had to hire minorities and females before they could hire any white males. Other than that, they are actively recruiting minority officers all the time. They're always trying to get more, because they will often have an imbalance in their hiring because for whatever reason they the applicants that are black don't have college time, for instance, is one reason that I don't really agree with that. But otherwise, they're actively recruiting all the time.
What do you have to say to people who say good police are guilty by association with bad police?
Well, you have to, when you say something like that, you have to say, is it fair for everyone? So if you're a painter and somebody's, steals some paint while he's working on the job, do you want to be then viewed as a thief also? Because there was another painter that worked with you, that was guilty of that. So
I just have one more. What do you have to say to people who feel like they've met many cops but have been hurt by them in some way in the past and now feel like they can't trust law enforcement officers?
I told you a story. You want me to tell that story? Okay, so my older sister married a man. He worked construction. He is a Vietnam veteran, and he rode a motorcycle to work that was kind of a chopped motorcycle, and he got stopped in Texas and for some traffic violation. And during the course of that, according to my brother-in-law, the police just started beating on him, and they knocked his teeth out. They knocked his front teeth out with a flashlight, I think, and then they beat him up pretty bad. He had some cuts on his face and his eyebrows and all that. And so they asked me when I was going through the hiring process, did I ever have any relatives that had been arrested before? And I told them that story. And so I guess the guy that was interviewing me was a little bit curious, about it. And I said, what, my thought on it is, if you think that's wrong, if you think that happened and it was wrong, you can sit and complain. Or you can go down there and put an application in. And if you think there's all these bad police officers, well then go down there and be a good one, because they're still taking applications. No matter where you are, you can go down there, you can put in an application.
Thanks, Dad.
Okay.